Well, welcome to Richie's Roost in Shaco, Mississippi. We had a little cold weather last week, but today has been a typical, beautiful, beautiful Mississippi day. Blue skies, pushing 70 degrees today, where it was really cold last week. So, as usual, Mississippi weather, if you don't like what you've got, just hang tight for a couple of days and it'll change. Last week, if you recall, I had a little trouble getting a little skunk out of out of a trap, but we did it, and we did it without any perfume being raised. He ambled off that night. We left the trap open, if you recall, and Perry was concerned that he didn't come out, but I told her that skunks are nocturnal. He'd be wandering around, and he would come out that night. Sure enough, next morning, the skunk was not in the trap. So he's out wandering around here in Shaco somewhere. God bless him. I don't want any more to do with him if I can help it. But he didn't spray me, and for that, I am grateful. Now, I'm going to do things a little differently today. A lot of people collect things. I'm kind of strange. I like to collect several things, and quotations from really bright or interesting or maybe not so bright people. I collect their quotations, and I got a lot of them. I thought I'd run through some of those today and kind of give you a little challenge that you might equate some of these quotations with conditions that we have today. So, and we may, even though it's a beautiful, wonderful, sunny day in Mississippi, we may have a little wind. So just if we do and it gets a little roary, just ignore it. And I'm going to give you some of these and maybe some things to think about, because next week we're going to dive into something maybe that's not so intellectual, maybe, but more like an opinion. We'll start off with this one by a man named Molotov, if you recall, who was the foreign minister of the Soviet Union from 1939 to 1949, and then again from 1953 to 1956. Molotov, the foreign minister of the Soviet Union. He said, the trouble with free elections is that you never know how they're going to turn out. Well, he's right. And you remember the words of Albert Einstein, is the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. I wonder what the intelligence level is in Washington, since nobody ever wants to change anything. Just use the same old rut. I do not believe it's the function of the judiciary to step in and change the law because the times have changed. I do well understand the difference between legislating and judging. As a judge, it is not my function to develop public policy. Now, that was quoted by a lovely, intellectual lady named Sandra Day O'Connor, who was the first woman justice on the United States Supreme Court. A lot of truth to that. Now, this next one gets a little deep, folks, if you stop and think about it. It's from a man named Elie Wiesel. Wiesel was a Romanian-born American writer, professor, political activist, Nobel laureate, and Holocaust survivor. He authored 57 books, written mostly in French and English, including Night, a work based on his experiences as a Jewish prisoner in the Auschwitz and Buchenwald concentration camps. That's according to Wikipedia. He said, and listen to this, what hurts the victim most is not the cruelty of the oppressor, but the silence of the bystander. Chew on that. Now, this next one is from a gentleman named Mao Zedong in 1949. You will recall that he headed up the Chinese Communist Party for years and years. He was the great leader. You are dictatorial. My dear sirs, you are right. That is just what we are. All the experience the Chinese people have accumulated through several decades teaches us to enforce the people's democratic dictatorship, that is, to deprive the reactionaries of the right to speak and let the people alone have that right. So, the reactionaries to the right don't have the right to speak. We let the people speak. Yeah, and he's the people. Oh, this next one, I really love the brevity and the intellect here. This is written by Francis of Assisi. A long time ago, folks, for you folks that are not Catholic, Francis of Assisi was he was a monk, I think you call him. He says, preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words. Now, this is from a man who you may have forgotten about. Most of you youngsters won't even know who he was by name unless it's explained. But he says it's the criminal left that belongs not in a dormitory, but in a penitentiary. The criminal left is not a problem to be solved by the department. This is the criminal that, well, let me start that back over again. This is the criminal left that belongs not in a dormitory, but in a penitentiary. The criminal left is not the problem to be solved by the Department of Philosophy or the Department of English. It is a problem for the Department of Justice. That was written by Vice President Spiro Agnew in 1970. He was our vice president in 1970. This next one comes from another intelligent lady. She said, some socialists seem to believe that people should be numbers in a state computer. We believe they should be individuals. We are all unequal. No one, thank heavens, is like anyone else, however much the socialists may pretend otherwise. We believe that everyone has the right to be unequal, but to us, every human being is equally important. Margaret Thatcher, 1975, Prime Minister of Britain. Now, this next one, you won't recognize his name, but you would recognize his works, I'm sure. He said, I wrote somewhere once that the third-rate mind was only happy when it was thinking with the majority. The second-rate mind was only happy when it was thinking with the minority. The first-rate mind was only happy when it was thinking. A. Milne. You don't recognize the name, but you would recognize Winnie the Pooh. He wrote Winnie the Pooh stories. Oh, and here's another one, sort of a hero of mine. This is Lee Iacocca. If you recall, Chrysler at one time was just in dire straits, almost going under, broke. They hired Lee Iacocca to head it up, and he turned it around. He said, "We at Chrysler borrow money the old-fashioned way. We pay it back." Here's one with a name even you public school folks might recognize. But our great security lies, I think, in our growing strength, both in numbers and wealth. Unless by a neglect of military discipline, we should lose all martial spirit, for there is much truth in the Italian saying, "Make yourselves sheep, and the wolves will eat you." Benjamin Franklin, 1773. Great security is in our growing strength, both in numbers and wealth. But if we neglect the military discipline, we're going to have problems. Here's another hero of mine. Had a few faults, but I love the way he operated. He said, if we lose the virile, manly qualities and sink into a nation of mere hucksters, putting gain over national honor and subordinating everything to a mere ease of life, then we shall indeed reach a condition worse than that of the ancient civilizations in the years of their decay. When it gets too easy, it's not good for you. It was written by Theodore Roosevelt in 1897. Now here's one that you philosophy majors in Harvard may recognize. If you do not take an interest in the affairs of your government, then you're doomed to live under the rule of fools. Written by a man named Plato. Now, this last one is the one we're going to end with. Written by that great intellectual and ersatz prognosticator, Al Gore. The North Pole will be ice-free in the summer by 2013 because of man-made global warming. Al Gore said that in 2009. The global warming in 4 years will make the North Pole ice-free. That global warming, man, will do it every time. Well, that's all for today. I hope that noise in the background didn't overpower us just a minute ago, but in my outside studio here in Chaco, you never can tell what kind of noise is going to come up or whether you may have a challenge like getting a skunk out of a trap. Oh, and by the way, if you watched that last week's video of my getting that skunk out of that trap, you will notice that I was getting instructions constantly from my partner who is observing all of this, but you will also notice that all of those instructions were coming from a very safe distance away. I just noticed that when I finally finished filming, which just proves she's probably smarter than I am. Of course, that's not a surprise. So that's all for today. Hope you'll take some of these quotations and think about them as we think about some of the things that are happening today. There'll be other times when we'll use others, but I thought you might enjoy these. So, I'm Jim Ritchie, and I'll see you again next time.